Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation titled Noisy Neighbors: How do Human Activity and Habitat Disturbance Impact the Nest Site Selection of Tree Swallows and Eastern Bluebirds? My name is Haley Howard from Radford University. My co-authors on this are Sarah Foltz, also from Radford University, Jessica Hernandez from Virginia Tech, and Ignacio Moore, also from Virginia Tech. So I want you to imagine you're a bird searching for your perfect home. There are many things you'd want to take into consideration, but I want you to briefly think about these three questions. So what would you want the environment to look like? How many humans would you like to see on a given day? And what would you prefer to hear or not hear while you're home? So why should we care where birds live? Urban expansion is increasing very quickly, forcing species to interact with humans a lot. Nest boxes are frequently placed near urban areas, and a better understanding of the nest box preferences of cavity nesting species would help combat possible negative impacts of human interaction, and also help us more efficiently use these nest boxes. So our study species are eastern bluebirds and tree swallows. Feel free to pause the video and read the information on the right, but they're both secondary cavity nesters, and they're found in open and semi-open habitats, including farms and suburbs. They have overlapping breeding ranges and seasons, which leads to a lot of competition for nest boxes in some areas. So here is the box competition for our sites. Deforestation and landscaping limit natural cavity availability in urban areas, so they're being forced to use more artificial nest boxes. Thus, competition for artificial nest boxes is very high between these species at our study sites. So just to help you visualize it, there is a graph on the right, and the bar that is yellow and outlined in navy blue represents the boxes that are used by both eastern bluebirds and tree swallows. The rest of the bars just represent other combinations of species or just individual species. So as you can see, the competition between these particular species is very, very high at our sites. So here are our field sites. They're both located in Southwest Virginia, and these are for last year, by the way. So Bissett Park is a public park located along the New River, and there's a river walkway where most of our boxes are located along, and that walkway sees a lot of traffic, anywhere from bicycle traffic to just general walking and running. And then our other site is Salu Conservancy, which is owned by Radford University, and it has this long gravel road that runs along it, and most of our boxes are located along that. Salu does not see nearly as many people as Bissett does. There's a farm located in it, but other than that, and there's an observatory, but other than that, the Conservancy doesn't really see that much traffic. So our hypothesis from last year was that we predicted both eastern bluebirds and tree swallows will prefer nest boxes environments that allow access to resources while minimizing predation risk, interspecies conflict, and human interference. And here are our variables from last year. So we explored 18 nest box and environmental features, and they're all listed over to the right. But we focused our analysis on 5 variables with sufficient variation across boxes because not many of the variables did have a lot of significant variation. So the ones that did are outlined in red. And then 2 of these variables came out significant, human activity and canopy cover. So for human activity, we saw a positive correlation with tree swallows and human activity and a negative correlation for eastern bluebirds. So eastern bluebirds preferred less human activity and tree swallows preferred more. We believe, though, that this is not really a preference, more so a tolerance. And then as for canopy cover, we did not see a correlation with eastern bluebirds, but for tree swallows, we saw a negative correlation, so they preferred less canopy cover, which makes sense because they're aerial foragers. So for this year's study, we've increased our sample size by adding an additional field site, and we've also measured an additional variable associated with human activity, which is ambient noise. So for this year, we focused on canopy cover, human activity, and ambient noise. And these are our hypotheses from last year, or from this year, and they go hand in hand with our hypothesis from last year. So tree swallows will tolerate boxes with more nearby human activity and prefer boxes with less canopy cover compared to eastern bluebirds. And then our second hypothesis for this year also goes hand in hand with last year. We predicted that tree swallows will also tolerate ambient noise associated with human activity more than eastern bluebirds. So here is our additional field site, Kentland Farm. It is owned by Virginia Tech, so it's located in Blacksburg, Virginia. They kind of have, it's very similar to Selu in the sense that they do not see too many people, and there's a farm and just kind of a few very secluded roads. So they kind of have three sub-sites within Kentland. So we just pulled a few from each of those sites, and it added up to a total of 20 additional boxes. So here are our variables. We collected them twice per box during their breeding season, so once in June and once in August. For canopy cover, we just took a phone and put it over each box and used an app called Percentage Cover to calculate it for us. As for ambient noise, however, we had a sound level meter, and it could measure both A and C weighted frequencies. So we just went to each box and measured the minimum and maximum frequencies for both weights in each direction, and we averaged them. And for human activity, we went to each box and set up a 20-meter radius around each one and took 30-minute observations at each box. So we counted pedestrians, motor, and non-motor vehicles within that radius, and we separated them into those three categories. And for any vehicles or people that stayed longer than 1 minute, we counted them an extra time per minute. So we determined species preference for individual boxes by regularly monitoring nest boxes during the breeding seasons, and we also recorded all nest attempts by each species for each box. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has prevented nest box monitoring at Kentland during 2020. As for data analysis, all of our analyses were run in SPSS. We ran regression analyses with backward selection, except for the activity comparison across sites, we ran in ANOVA. So COVID-19 has impacted our data set in a number of ways. Unfortunately, we do not have a data set that includes all three sites and all three variables. There was also a very significant increase in human activity at Bissett. So to compensate, we split our data into two sets for separate analysis. We pulled the 2020 data from Bissett and Selu only, and then we also pulled the 2017 through 2019 box use data from all three sites, but we used the data on box features collected in 2020. So here are our results. Here are our results for canopy cover. So we saw a negative correlation for both sets of data for tree swallows and no correlation for either set for eastern bluebirds. So Kentland boxes were unexpectedly homogeneous and almost universally low canopy cover. Pretty much all of their boxes had no canopy cover. There were a few of them that had a small amount, but for the most part, none of them had any. But we did expect to see this trend as we saw it last year, and tree swallows are aerial foragers, so it makes sense. Now here are our results for human activity. So for 2020, it matched, the pattern from 2020 matched previous years. That eastern bluebirds had a negative correlation to human activity. They preferred less, whereas tree swallows kind of tolerated human activity a bit more. But once we added Kentland in, which was again unexpectedly homogeneous with very low activity levels, we did not see that trend. And now here is our inter-year human activity comparison. So this is just to help you visualize how much more activity occurred at Bissett from 2019 to 2020. So Bissett is in red, Salu's in purple, and Kentland is in green. And we saw a massive jump from 2019 to 2020 for Bissett when it comes to total activity. So potential explanations for this is that it could be due to the fact that we had a later collection in 2020 or the pandemic boosting outdoor activities. And now lastly, here are our results for noise. So we saw an unexpected positive trend between tree swallows and C-weighted noise. And there was no relationship with A-weighted measures. It came out insignificant. But this positive trend was unexpected because we didn't really expect to see a positive correlation with tree swallows, more so a negative correlation with eastern bluebirds, or just more of a tolerance displayed for tree swallows. But C-weighted measures focus on low-frequency noise pollution, which is common in urban areas. So it's more appropriate anyways. But yes, we did not expect to see this trend. And we do not think that it's actually a preference, more so just a tolerance. So here are our conclusions. Data from Kentland suggests that both species are willing to use low activity sites with little canopy cover. And this also further supports the idea that tree swallows don't necessarily prefer high disturbance areas, since they clearly still use low disturbance areas as well. However, species-specific preferences for certain box features still exist, and careful manipulation of these features could reduce box competition. There's definitely an apparent tree swallow tolerance for noise and human activity, and it may make this species more likely to use boxes in urban and/or high disturbance areas. But it is also important to note that, again, this most likely is not a preference. It is most likely a tolerance. For all we know, though, high disturbance areas could actually be helping them. They could be hurting them, or they could just have no effect and they just have a tolerance. We would need to look at fledgling success and nest quality to be able to actually draw any conclusions on this. So for our future directions, we definitely want to expand our study to field sites with more human activity, not just more human activity, but more levels of the human activity that we're looking at across all three categories. We also want to explore more sources of low frequency noise and other disturbances like light pollution near boxes, just any variables that humans cause. Then we also want to examine nest success and nestling quality in relation to box disturbance metrics, like I mentioned in the previous slide, just so we can see if high disturbance areas are actually helping tree swallows, or they're just tolerant of them, or if they actually prefer them, etc. So that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a message on the meeting page or contact me directly. Thank you so much.